Hi, and welcome to the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. I'm your host, Tegan Thompson. I'm a book lover, a chocoholic, and an INTJ living in a world filled with extroverts. I made this podcast to share my experiences and struggles as an introverted perfectionist, and to bring the inner workings of an introvert's mind to introverts and extroverts alike. So grab a cup of tea and get comfortable. It's time to unmute. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. It's already August. Can you believe that? I think it's so crazy how fast this year has been going, especially compared to last year. Like last year felt so slow, and this year just feels like it's kind of like flying by already in our 8th month of the year. And it's just so crazy. Basically, summer is coming to an end, and we're going to be entering fall, and which is exciting because I absolutely love fall. So, good and bad, right? But yeah, it's already August. That's crazy. So this week we will be talking about the extroverted introvert. And I wanted to talk about this because there's probably a lot of people who can resonate with kind of both extroverted and introverted qualities. So, what is an extroverted introvert? So, if you recall how I discussed previously in multiple episodes, kind of this introvert-extrovert spectrum, right? You're like not 100% an introvert or 100% an extrovert. You can lie somewhere in between those two, right? So some people lie at those extremes of the spectrum. They might be, 95% extroverted or 90% introverted, right? That would be an extreme, and they would probably identifying kind of places them at either introvert or extrovert. However, most people kind of lie somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, which gives them qualities of both an introvert and an extrovert. And it might be confusing for them because they're like, but I identify with both, so how, what am I, right? So people who identify as an extroverted introvert are usually an introvert at heart, but they may be slightly more willing to participate in social events, not get as drained as much or as fast, and or they may need less time to recharge compared to just a regular introvert, right? And so if I were to place them kind of on that spectrum, I wouldn't say they're right in the middle necessarily. I would still say they lean more towards an introverted side, but they're not at that extreme of being an introvert. And an extroverted introvert can also be known as an outgoing introvert or a social introvert. Some people argue that an extroverted introvert is the same thing as an ambivert, the same thing as ambiversion. I personally do not think they are the same thing. I think they are two different things. I'm planning on doing my episode next week on ambiversion, so I will go in more depth on that and hopefully give you a better explanation of why they are different. But kind of just to sum up what I think is basically, like I just said, an extroverted introvert, they're not necessarily like in the middle. They're still leaning more towards an introverted side, but they're not at that extreme of being an introvert, whereas an ambivert kind of lies more directly in that middle, not necessarily exactly at 50%, but kind of within maybe like 40 to 60%, right? So that's kind of just a quick thing on why I don't think they are the same thing, but I plan to go in more depth on that next week, so stay tuned for that. So yeah, an extroverted introvert, they're someone who is kind of, they're just they believe that they're an introvert and that they kind of more identify with an introvert, but at the same time, they have those slight extroverted qualities about them that kind of makes them a little different, right? So what are some signs that you may be an extroverted introvert, or signs that someone you know may be an extroverted introvert? The first one I have on my list is that certain people drain you while others recharge you. And before I kind of explain this, I want to first note that this is different from an introvert, right? For like a regular introvert who may lie more towards that extreme, they don't feel like that some people recharge you. They tend to think that all people are draining, no matter who they are. It's just that some people may drain you less or not as quickly as others, right? So, for my example, I would identify more as an introvert, and I can be around like large groups and people I don't really know for a very short period of time before I start feeling really drained. And for me, that's maybe an hour. And then I can hang out with like close friends or family, and I can hang out with them for multiple hours or even a whole day maybe before really starting to feel drained and like I need to go home and recharge, right? So an extroverted introvert, they feel like there are some people who recharge them. So what that means is, as an extroverted introvert, you may have a few close friends you feel like you could hang out with forever, right? Like you could just talk with them endlessly on different topics and do different things with them, and you would never get bored or never get tired. And at the end of hanging out with them, you essentially feel better than you did before because they recharged you, they gave you more energy. So that's kind of the difference between an introvert and an extroverted introvert. But that's a big quality of being an extroverted introvert, is that, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people who drain your energy and that make you feel like you need to go recharge. But at the same time, you're going to have those few people who do recharge you and give you that energy, and like you feel comfortable to hang out with them for really long periods of time if you could. The second thing is that you need time to warm up in social situations. So at first you may come across as quiet and reserved, but once you feel comfortable, you have no problem engaging in small talk and other social interactions. So the more comfortable you are with someone, the more extroverted, so to say, you may seem. So this is also different from an introvert, where an introvert may need time to warm up, but they're not necessarily still going to be comfortable engaging in the small talk and some of those social interactions that an extroverted introvert may feel comfortable engaging in. Or an extroverted introvert may need less time to warm up in a social situation compared to a more like introvert who's on the extreme side, right? And then the third thing is that you're selectively social. So as an extroverted introvert, yes, you gain satisfaction from your relationships, from the people you're close to, like your friends and your family, but you don't necessarily have the energy to maintain large social networks. like you just may not click with everyone, which that can be said for most people. But you also may have just a few close relationships. You're not gonna like be extending yourself to have 15 different friends and be trying to be close to them. You might keep your circle really small to just like 2 to 5, maybe. 5 might be a little much, but yeah, you're just keeping that circle small to those people you trust and those people who do recharge you and you feel really comfortable with. Yeah, so just being selectively social. And I think in general, pretty much everyone is selectively social. But as an extroverted introvert, you may not be as selectively social as an introvert who kind of like has a really small circle and then won't really expand outside of that. But you're not as social as an extrovert. You're going to try to keep that small circle, and you're willing to meet new people, but you're not willing to meet like a ton of new people. You want that quality in those relationships over the quantity. And then the last thing I have is that you're often confused with an extrovert. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who may feel this way. So you might have close friends and family that may not believe you're an introvert. They might be like, no, you're too social to be an introvert, or too outgoing to be an introvert. Why would you ever say you're an introvert? You're definitely an extrovert. But in reality, you feel like you're an extrovert. You have come to know yourself as an extrovert. You know how you get your energy, that you need time to recharge in order to go out and be in those social situations. Like, you know yourself and you know that you are an introvert at heart, but that you just come off as an extrovert when you're around your really close friends and family, right? And then also, it may have taken you some time to realize that you're an introvert, right? You might have thought growing up that you were an extrovert because you weren't quite so introverted that you weren't willing to go meet new people or engage in that small talk in social interactions and stuff like that. But you weren't as social as your extrovert, so you were like, I guess technically I'm an extrovert, but I don't know if I feel like I'm completely an extrovert. So yeah, it may have taken you some time to find out who you are and how you work. And I hope you've taken the time to do that. If you haven't, maybe do some self-reflection, some introspection to identify that for you, because maybe you're not really the extrovert you thought you were, and you're actually more of an introvert who just can come off as an extrovert sometimes, and that's okay. But identify how you want to identify. So before I end this episode, I do want to finish by saying that there's no wrong way to be an extrovert or to be an introvert, right? However you want to identify and whatever you believe best fits you, then identify that way. No one can tell you you're wrong or that you're not that way, because that's how you want to identify and that's how you believe you are. And so identify that way. I think just talking about being an extroverted introvert might sound kind of contradicting. And so it's kind of like, am I being an introvert correctly? Yes, because there's no wrong way to be an introvert. However you work and however you engage in those social interactions is perfectly fine. If you are okay engaging in those social interactions and then need time to recharge, that doesn't not make you an introvert. That can still make you an introvert. So just find who you are and learn who you are and identify how you want to, because you get to choose that. Other people don't. Especially when it comes to things like this, with personality and stuff. That's you. That's not other people. So I just want to say thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. If you learned anything new, or if you enjoyed this episode, please go share it with a friend. And as always, have a good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you guys again next week on the Heart of a Perfectionist podcast. Wow.